about this parsha in terms of how do we move from things that we see as wrong and negative to things that we Yaakov Avinu is one of our patriarchs. So how do we make that switch if we see him as having done wrong, and I also want to focus, as I went into this work more and more, I want to focus also on the concept of generational trauma. So I'm putting that out up front. And I'm curious if you, are you guys used to a interactive setting? Because that's where I'm most comfortable. Oh, thank you for the welcome. So I'd sort of encourage you to just unmute yourself if you have something to say. And if that gets too chaotic, we'll move to a hand raising system.
Or put it in chat if they
or put it in chat. Yes, I wasn't sure how we felt about it.
Yeah, we do things now we wouldn't normally have been doing. So
I'm totally there with you. So I wanted to throw it out there. It's a very, very action-packed Torah portion. So I wanted to ask if I could have a couple of people who would volunteer to say what they think the main drama is. It doesn't have to be the climax, but the main drama for you in this parsha.
So we're just speaking out then?
Yes, popcorn style.
Right. I guess for me, this is David. The main drama, I guess, is the conflict between the brothers, which is age-old conflict that continues to this day. And I guess the conflict between the parents, the wife wanting one thing and the husband wanting another. And then, of course, the deception on all parts, which is, I find, rather disturbing.
Yeah, a lot of deception, very disturbing. Okay, let's dig in. So you mentioned I would say the main points of contention. We have the struggle, which starts in the womb, right? They're wrestling as they're inside. Poor Rivka, she's not having an easy pregnancy because these two twins are at odds, right? And it continues and continues and continues. Malachi is talking about it. I was really felt like I should have gone into that part, the Haftarah, a little more when thinking about this because it fits in so well. Okay, so the struggle, so let's talk about the struggles with the brothers. Before we get to deception, I thought we would talk a little bit about the selling of the birthright. So I do have a source sheet that I can share my screen, but something I really enjoy is when people tell the story in their own words. So can someone pop in with Esau selling his birthright? How would you tell that story? Don't be shy.
He came,
all right. Oh, good.
Came in from the field. He was very hungry, and his brother had food on the pit. I guess they didn't have stoves back then. And so in exchange for the food, because he said he was starving, his brother said, if you sell me your birthright, I'll give you the food.
Perfect. That is exactly right. So I'm going to share my screen. Oh boy, that does not, I should have checked that out. Okay, we will do it orally. So Esau becomes this hunter as he grows, and we know, as it was mentioned, Isaac favors Esau because he's a hunter, and Rebecca favors Jacob. No explanation given. And so Esau is doing this hard labor of hunting out in the fields. I've never gone hunting. I imagine it's pretty different from modern hunting, probably high energy, and he's starving. He comes home, he's really hungry, and Jacob is cooking. Hold on. Jacob's cooking, and
Rabbi
Jacob,
Simring, do you,
yeah.
oh, I was going
Valerie's
to
going to
say,
share my screen for you.
perfect. Okay. I just want to know if you needed any help. Okay.
I appreciate that. So, okay. So, Jacob says, first sell me your birthright. And Esau says, what do I need my birthright for? I'm hungry. Right now, I see in front of me, you've been cooking. You're obviously not going to eat all that food, right? Why? I don't care about my birthright. Just give me the food. Okay. And Jacob says, well, promise me, right? Swearing is pretty big deal, right? It's a Shabbat, right? Hishabah. So swearing, you can't take that back. So Esau does it and sells his birthright. And so to me, this has the whiff of deception as far as Jacob goes, right? Like if someone came to me, even if I didn't like them and they were like, give me that food, I don't think I'd say, give me everything you're going to inherit. It seems not so nice on Jacob's part. But the commentators are very, very concerned that Esau is going to be the bad guy, because ultimately Esau is the ancestor of the Edomites, and Yaakov is our ancestor. So the rabbis want to make sure that we understand that Esau is the one in the wrong here. So if we can just scroll down, we have Rashi and Sforno, I believe. So thus Esau spurned, right? So it says scripture testifies, He'id hakatuv, the Torah bears witness, al risho, to his badness, right? Because he had no regard for worship of Hamakom, right? Of God. So obviously he was bad, because part of his birthright was to create the Jewish people ultimately, and he didn't want to do that. So that's why he was willing to get rid of it for just a bowl of lentil soup. And Sforno also is on board with Rashi. They usually, I think, agree with each other. And I'll say, I didn't find any traditional commentaries on this where they were like, Jacob was asking too high a price for the bowl of lentils. So Sforno says Esau scorned the birthright. Even after the sale, he didn't consider the birthright to be worth the money he received for it, which is a little strange. What he received in exchange for it, I guess we would say. So we can't say that he was cheated. Jacob didn't trick him. He said it clearly. I'll give you the price of these lentils is your birthright. Esau wasn't tricked, and he's not tricked later because he already gave it up willingly. And he swore to it. So I don't know, do we have any reactions about that from anybody?
I find it interesting, and I think that he knew from past experience that he comes in from the field famished. So he knew he would have a bargaining chip because he sees how his brother comes in before. And I also think he was the the favored son because he stayed home and cooked with his mother.
Mhm.
That's why she favored him over his brother who was always out hunting.
Lovely.
The mama's
Lovely.
boy.
Yeah, and we'll get a little more into his connection with Rivka. And I was going to save this for later, but I'll also bring in now that we have a similar dichotomy of two brothers, one who prefers working away and one who stays home, and it's Cain and Abel. But the roles are a little bit reversed, where Abel is the one who's more of a hunter and Cain is more of a farmer. But yes, definitely Rivka gets to spend more time with Yaakov, and she has a fondness for him. He's gentle, right? We think of the hunter as someone who's there's a kind of machismo about it, right? And we'll go into a little bit more of Isaac and Rivka's issues in a little while, but let's get into the deceiving of Isaac, which is, I think, the kind of really the climax of this. So does anyone want to tell this, or should we read it through in English?
Read it through, I guess.
Read it through. Okay. When Isaac was old and his eyes were too dim to see, he called his older son Esau and said to him, "My son." He answered, "Hineni, here I am." And he said, "I am old now, and I do not know how soon I may die. Take your gear, your quiver and bow, and go out into the open and hunt me some game, so that I may give you my innermost blessing before I die." Rebekah had been listening as Isaac spoke to his son Esau. When Esau had gone out into the open to bring game home, Rebekah said to her son Jacob, "I overheard your father speaking to your brother Esau, saying, 'Bring me some game and prepare a dish for me to eat, that I may bless you with the Lord's approval before I die.' Now, my son, listen carefully as I instruct you. Go to the flock and fetch me 2 choice kids, and I will make them a dish for your father, such as he likes. Then take it to your father to eat, in order that he may bless you before he dies." Jacob answered his mother Rebekah, "But my brother is a hairy man, and I'm smooth-skinned. If my father touches me, I shall appear to him as a trickster and bring upon myself a curse, not a blessing." But his mother said to him, "Your curse, my son, be upon me. Just do as I say and go fetch them for me." He got them and brought them to his mother. And his mother prepared a dish such as his father liked. Rebekah then took out the best clothes of her older son Esau, which were in the house, and had her younger son Jacob put them on. And she covered his hands and the hairless part of his neck with the skins of the kids. Then she put in the hands of her son Jacob the dish and the bread that she had prepared. He went to his father and said, "Father." And he said, "Yes, which of my sons are you?" Jacob said to his father, "I am Esau, your firstborn. I have done as you told me. Pray sit up and eat of my game, that you may give me your innermost blessing." Isaac said to his son, "How did you succeed so quickly, my son?" And he said, "Because the Lord, your God, granted me good fortune." Isaac said to Jacob, "Come closer that I may feel you, my son, whether you are really my son Esau or not." So Jacob drew close to his father Isaac, who felt him and wondered, "The voice is the voice of Jacob, yet the hands are the hands of Esau." He did not recognize him because his hands were hairy, like those of his brother Esau, and so he blessed him. He asked, "Are you really my son Esau?" And when he said, "I am," he said, "Serve me and let me eat of my son's game, that I may give you my innermost blessing." So he served him and he ate, and he brought him wine and he drank. Then his father Isaac said to him, "Come close and kiss me, my son." And he went up and kissed him. And he smelled his clothes and he blessed him, saying, "Ah, The smell of my son is like the smell of the fields that the Lord has blessed. May God give you the dew of heaven and the fat of the earth, abundance of new grain and wine. Let people serve you and nations bow to you. Be master over your brothers, and let your mother's sons bow to you. Cursed be they who curse you, blessed they who bless you. No sooner had Jacob left the presence of his father Isaac, after Isaac had finished blessing Jacob, then his brother Esau came back from his hunt. He too prepared a dish and brought it to his father. And he said to his father, let my father sit up and eat of his son's game so that you may give me your innermost blessing. And his father Isaac said to him, who are you? And he said, I am your son Esau, your firstborn. Isaac was seized with very violent trembling. Who was it then, he demanded, that hunted game and brought it to me? I mean, by the way, he probably knows, right? He already said the voice is the voice of Jacob. Moreover, I ate of it before you came and I blessed him. Now he must remain blessed. When Esau heard his father's words, he burst into wild and bitter sobbing and said to his father, bless me too, father. But he answered, your brother came with guile and took away your blessing. Esau said, was he then named Yaakov, which means to uproot, as well as, anyway, it has multiple meanings, but one is to uproot, that he might supplant me these 2 times. First, he took away my birthright, and now he has taken away my blessing. And he added, have you not reserved a blessing for me? Isaac answered, saying to Esau, but I have made him master over you. I have given him all his brothers for servants. And he sustained him with grain and wine. What then can I still do for you, my son? And Esau said to his father, have you but one blessing, father? Bless me too, father. And Esau wept aloud. So this, I mean, I think this is a huge example of I think this is the climax of the story. There's a huge amount of pathos in this hairy, almost brute of a man. He's big, he's strong, he's muscular, he's red-faced, and he bursts into tears because he believed that he had, he had the love of his father. And even without the birthright, maybe he could just have one blessing. And one of the commentators, which I didn't include here, said that he couldn't bless him further because in the blessing he gave to Jacob, Isaac had already made Jacob master of any of his brothers, so that anything he would give to Esau would be meaningless. But I want to continue with this idea of pathos and this idea of almost a tragic relationship with Isaac and his sons. And so we have this sforno, have you but one blessing, bless me too, father. Seeing that you thought at the time you dispensed the blessing that it was I who stood before you, and you surely did not have in mind to bestow the spiritual blessing, the supreme blessing. You must have reserved this blessing for my brother. You surely had not intended that I, Esau, would be the sole beneficiary of all of your blessings, right? So he's saying, even if you were going to give me all the material blessings, you know that Jacob was a homebody and he's your son too. Wouldn't you have reserved some blessing power for him, something that matched who he was? And as much as it's a betrayal, Isaac says, it wasn't me. I mean, I feel very like Eve, oh, it wasn't me. Everybody in the Garden of Eden, it wasn't me. Isaac, it wasn't me, it was your brother. Isaac is generally a very passive figure, as we'll talk about in a moment, in the Isaac stories. And he, in a way, who does the trickery, right? It's a combination of Jacob, it's a combination with Rivka, And it's Isaac not feeling confident enough. And you can understand, certainly when I worked in a long-term care facility, people didn't trust their faculties anymore. They thought things were real and then they second guessed themselves. So we know that Isaac is in a state of not just old age, but approaching death. He's unwell. So he may have second guessed himself, but he asked multiple times, right? Not just once, if that was truly Esau, right? He had his suspicions. And in the end, he did feel like he had to just trust the person who was there, right? He had done the instructions, he was hairy, he smelled like him, but the voice wasn't the same. So I feel like there are a few things. I'd love to open it up for reactions and just take away the shared screen for a moment to be able to see everybody and see, how you're feeling about this whole experience of this deception and betrayal that is orchestrated by Rivka and Yaakov.
It appears it's not just Rivka and Yaakov, but also a higher authority, like God. First,
Yeah.
God makes him not find food quick enough and be hungry, and he sells his birthright. Then he intervenes and makes sure that he doesn't hunt quick enough so Yaakov could get the blessing. So
Right.
It wasn't just the trickery of his mother. It was God who intervened and didn't let it carry out the way Yaakov, the way Yitzchak really wanted it.
Right.
So he didn't
And
give him.
sorry. Was
Yeah.
there more?
No, that's it. The other thing that bothers me is Yaakov actually lying when he specifically asks him, "Are you Esau?" At that, he is his son, so he didn't lie there. But when he lied to his father and said, "I am Esau," that also was a major betrayal from Yaakov. Those are the things that bother me.
Yes, 100%. And it's a really troubling story. Barry and Eileen post, it's never good to play favorites, especially within a family. But you're talking about somehow that there is also God interfering here. And I think we can never forget how present God is as a character in these stories of the first families. So you'll see a little later, I have a flow chart, but this was my original flow chart, which is basically impossible for anyone else to read besides me. But I do have God causing harm here. So one of the commentators that I didn't include said that one of the reasons Rivka said any curse is going to be upon me is because she knows there's no curse. She already knows, oh yeah, that's our new flow chart. We'll get to that, not quite yet. She already knows that that Yaakov, because of the message that God gave her while she was pregnant and saying, "Why me? What's going on?" God said, "The younger will rule over the older." So she felt, I'm perfectly confident in making sure that Yitzchak, my husband, gives my favored son, the younger son, the blessing, because God already told me this is how it has to work. This is the blessing. This is not a curse. This is how it's meant to be. So one of the things that I want to get into is that when I started prison chaplaincy, well, it's technically not prisons, I work in jails, is that one of my mentors who had worked for a long time in correctional facilities, Rabbi Joanna Katz, said, prison chaplaincy is all about trauma. There is nothing that isn't somehow related to trauma. And almost everybody who winds up in a correctional facility has experienced some sort of trauma. And at first I thought it was the trauma of being arrested, and in some cases that's true. But as I've gotten to know people, both currently incarcerated and formerly incarcerated, that holds up. So I don't ever want to take away the idea that we have free will and personal agency. I think that's always important, and that's something that I stress, especially when I'm talking to people who have done really terrible things. But for me, part of understanding everybody as a human who is in the divine image and is worthy of spiritual care and my care is recognizing that they never existed in a void. They're part of a family system. They're part of a societal system. They may be part of a religious system. Everything is connected. So right before we get to the generational trauma flowchart, I want to go to another story that is just such a teensy tiny blip in Toldot, but that I think is actually very important in the understanding the development of Rivka and who she is. So just to go rewind to Chaye Sarah, Rivka is a young woman, probably a girl. There's a midrash that says she's 3. That's very disturbing. We're gonna not pay attention to that one. She's probably, early teens. And she's confident and she's forthright, and she comes up to Eliezer, Abraham's servant, and is like, let me get you water, and let me get you water for your camels, and stay with my family. And he's like, I think you should marry my boss's son. And she says, great. And her parents say, I don't know, we have to ask her first, and she has the agency to say yes or no, and she says yes. And that means uprooting from everything she's ever known and moving and immigrating, right? She becomes a teenage immigrant. Does anyone have teenage immigrants in your family's past? Maybe fleeing. My grandmother fled Nazi Germany, right? The experience, of course, yes, I see hands going up. The experience of immigrating, even not under duress, can be a source of trauma. Of course, when we think about our immigrant family, often it was under duress, so there was trauma compounded. But right, the major life events that we talk about when we're like, oh, these are huge stressors, are death of a loved one, new job, new home, and I can't remember the 4th one right now. But right, loss of a home, of a country is a huge loss. There was a mother who was a teenage immigrant. Okay, great. So she comes, but happy story, like Isaac is so holy. She sees him out praying in a field that she wraps herself up, even though this whole time she hasn't been modest around Eliezer. All of a sudden she's like struck, it's really love at first sight with Isaac. And we're told he takes her to his mother's tent and he loves her. And that's the second mention of love in the Torah. The first is that Abraham loves his son. So, right, is the at the Akedah, right? A great moment to say, the one you love, kill that one, right? So love is not, we don't talk about love between Adam and Eve. We don't talk about love between Noach and Naamah. We don't talk about love between Abraham and Sarah. We talk about love between Isaac and Rivka. This is a love marriage. It was arranged, but it worked out really well. So we have this great thing going. They're going really well. So if you could share the next text that I want to bring in, because I think this is part of Rivka's development. So we have, a little above there. Yes, Genesis 26, yes. So Isaac stayed in Gerar. When the men of the place asked him about his wife, he said, "She is my sister." For he was afraid to say "my wife," thinking the men of this place might kill me on account of Rebekah, for she is beautiful. When some time passed, Avimelech, the king of the Philistines, looked out his window and saw Isaac fondling his wife Rebekah. Avimelech sent for Isaac and said, "So she is your wife. Why then did you say she is my sister?" Isaac said to him, "Because I thought I might lose my life on account of her." Avimelech said, "What have you done to us? One of the people might have lain with your wife, and you would have brought guilt upon us." So, and I put down the text about Isaac loving her below that, but we already talked about it. The reason this really strikes me. So we'll skip the mitzachek for a second, but what Avimelech actually says is, "Kim'at shechav echad ha'am et ishtecha v'haveta alav asham," right? So it says one of the people might have, it's very softened in English. This is, is anyone a modern Hebrew speaker who wants to hop in here? If not, that's okay. Here's my interpretation. Kim'at, almost. Kim'at shachav, almost slept with her. And then it said echad ha'am, which means one of the people. And Chizkuni says, he literally means like one of the commoners could have slept with her, can't control those commoners. But Rashi and Sforno say the number one of the people, the premier, the king, he's talking about himself. I almost slept with her, right? How, in what situation is this describing a situation where the king might have slept with her? We don't know all the details, but somehow she was vulnerable to have been taken to bed by the king. And if my husband who loved me put me in a position where that was kim'at, it almost happened, I think I would have some resentment. Like I thought we had something together. I thought you would protect me in a situation where I was vulnerable. So, you may know this text. So let's go back to where I can see people's faces a little better. You may know this text, and it may seem familiar because we also had it with Abraham, right? We had two situations. One where Abraham was with Pharaoh in Egypt, and that one, which was the earlier episode, Pharaoh she actually goes to Pharaoh's palace and she's living with him. And because of that, she gets blessed, or Abraham gets, or Avram at that time gets blessed. But it doesn't talk about, was Sarai willing to go live with the Pharaoh, who presumably had a number of wives and concubines? It's not until God sends plagues that Sarai is sent back to her husband. And then again, he sends her away in that same place in Gerar, where Isaac would leave Rivka vulnerable, and says that, she's my sister. And Avimelech only finds out that that she's actually Abraham's wife because God comes to Avimelech in a dream. So Isaac wasn't around for those times with Abraham and Sarah. So one can assume that he experienced this as a survival necessity, right? He thought that they both had a better chance of living if he passed his wife off as a sister. And I want to also point out the parallels in the text where Rivka says, if there's a curse, the curse is going to be on me. And Avimelech says to Yitzchak, you are the cause of any curse that comes on me, right? So there's the sense that whose responsibility are curses? So I think with Avimelech, we see that it's actually Yitzchak is causing the curse. And Yitzchak actually, there's no curse because luckily he catches them in the act and realizes what's going on and says nobody should bother these people. And as a result of that, oh boy, 10 more minutes. Okay. As a result of that, Yaakov is blessed, right? So there's the deception of Avimelech and Yaakov gets blessed. There's the deception of Isaac and Yaakov gets blessed. The deception of Avimelech and Yitzchak gets blessed. Deception of Yitzchak and Yaakov gets blessed. So there's definitely a play in this parsha with the different ways that people are deceived and blessed and receive blessing through deception. So I do want to, so maybe we won't get to forgiveness, but I do want to get to the trauma mapping. So if you don't mind pulling up my very fancy flow chart, then we can see it looks like this. So can we share the screen? Yes, thank you, Valerie. So I want to point out what happens. So the green lines are there's some sort of abuse or exploitation, right? Sarah, I would say it's exploitative for Abraham to send Sarah to live with Pharaoh in order to preserve his life and get wealth. Even if they generally had a good relationship, this is not to say that the relationships were all bad or all good. I think Hagar is exploited as a sexual pawn with both Sarah, it says she treats her badly, she abuses her. Ishmael gets sent out, gets cast out with Hagar, presumably to die in the desert, but God saves them. And even though, and again, we have this arrow that's the blue arrow pointing to Abraham is outside factors, but really it's sort of these God factors. We have Ishmael possibly abusive to Isaac. The thing that he did, mitzachek, is debated by scholars. It is either, it's literally they were playing together and it could have just been that. But I wanted to point out the parallel of Rivka and Isaac. What they were doing that Avimelech saw was mitzachek. And very early on, the scholars picked up on this and said, well, Ishmael was sexually abusive to Isaac, and Sarah obviously wouldn't stand for that. Ishmael is a teenager. So, okay, Abraham loved Isaac. So that's why we have a pink arrow there. But the green arrow is, he also took him out with the intention to kill him. And if that's not traumatic and sort of abusive, I'm not sure, imagine your parent threatening to kill you, or God forbid, you might have actually had that experience. It happens. That could have traumatized Isaac. Isaac loved Rivka, but was willing to put her in danger, right? Kimat, it was this close. I was this close to having sex with your wife. But he also loved her incredibly. And I wonder if, in some way, Rivka and Yaakov, as the underdogs, were hoping to subvert this sort of flow of abuse and exploitation by causing harm to Isaac and Esau with this deception. And I would say that that didn't end the cycle. And in fact, I was really struck in the Haftarah when God says, this was forever. This was supposed to be forever. And Esau is always going to be on the outs with me. But God also says, you guys aren't worshiping me properly, and all the other nations, presumably including the Edomites, are worshiping me properly, right? And another thing I'll point out as we sort of run out of time is Esau and Ishmael both feel cast out as outsiders. And Esau, at the end of the Parsha, as we heard beautifully laned by Cole, Esau goes and marries Ishmael's daughter. And I think that can be seen as, how do we deal with when we'll decide that our imahot and avot are the mainstream? When the mainstream spurns you, you become more tribalistic in a different direction, right? Or if the cool kids in the cafeteria sit together, well, you're gonna make your own pink hair, blue hair group, eyeliner wearing over in this corner of the cafeteria, right? We've seen it on every teenage drama. So these are, I think, really natural and very human responses to a very complicated time and a very complicated family structure. And I think the healing of this family really comes with Joseph much later, when he forgives his brothers, because we hear and see echoes of this sort of love, trauma, abuse continuing down through that line, of course, where Joseph is sold into slavery and his father is deceived. So, so I think I should probably wrap up. If anybody wants to ask questions specifically or has a comment about how this might cause you to think about the imahot and avot in different ways, not necessarily negative. I mean, I really want to emphasize that this isn't condemning these tzaddikim, but it is creating them in a way that is more human, and also I think may be a way to understand and humanize people who find themselves, not just find themselves, but perpetuate violence and other criminal acts. But I'm curious what other people think.
Would this be getting towards all these terrible things that are happening between the families and in the community? It sounds to me that that's kind of like natural for the peoples to do this, but it's leading towards morality and all the other things that they're discovering, that the Jews are discovering, going through history, that this isn't the way families or peoples or civilizations should act. I'm taking it from a more, that they're showing us this is the way it was, but it's going to change as we get further on.
I love that, because in so many ways, Genesis is about the development of a Jewish people and peoplehood, and to evolve, right? And like I said, I feel like the healing of the family starts with Joseph, which is also the point in the Torah where we go from family drama to national drama. So I think you're spot on there. Someone has entered something in the chat. Yeah, it's very easy to go along with deception or some kind of wrong when the pattern of doing so is set by people before or around you. From Howard Katz. I don't know if you're a therapist or something, but that sounds very, very much in line, very psychologically astute as well. Yeah.
I'm not a therapist, but I'm an academic, and I'm often surrounded by people who do things a certain way, even though many already know and have been told it's wrong, don't do it this way, and it keeps happening. It's just something I'm observing, wish I could do something about, but it comes from personal experience that way.
Absolutely. Well, we each do a little bit about the wrong we see in the world. We each do a little bit of tikkun, at least by being an example of what not to do. And that's the first step. But yeah, exactly. There are subcultures, like academia is a subculture where things become normative. Yeah.
I have to say, I never looked at it from the standpoint that all the blessings were given with nothing left for the other brother. And the fact that when he realized that his father was going to give him everything and leave nothing for his brother, it almost made him think of his father a little bit differently.
I think you're
Never
absolutely
looked at it that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. So each of these children, right, Isaac with Abraham, gets to a point where, wow, you're still my parent, but I can't think of you the same way ever again. And Esau, who in Judaism ends up being a minor character, right? He's major in that we talk about him, and then he sort of fades into, like Ishmael, fades into the background, but he also is part of the system. And thank you to Barry and Eileen. One of you is a probation agent, so I am so happy to see a colleague in the justice system, and seeing these family issues in the people you supervise. Absolutely. Thank you guys so much. I know I have to end, but thank you so much for having me, and I hope I've given you your neurons some nourishment. And it's been a pleasure.
Yishar Kochech, thank you very much to Rabbi Simring for joining us. One of the